Well, it's a beautiful day in Oklahoma. Yesterday it was miserable. We had a cold front come through and actually had snow in the panhandle. It's coming around though. Promises to be the last nasty day, I think. We got an inch or 2 inches of rain, and the sun's really making the strawberries pop. The wife is in the backyard cleaning the pool. The nuts are out with their hot rod cars. How would you like to come inside and unwrap my Christmas present with me? It's about 50 outside, about 150 in here. I had wrapped this all up because I had reshot the roof, and we're getting closer and closer. Ooh, look at that, water on the floor. We're getting closer and closer to the marriage of the body and the chassis. So I'm going to unwrap this. I've got tar pads ordered for the back. They should be here sometime this week. And I've got an engine seal to put in also. And then Dan can come over and we can whack the body and buff it. And then I'll take my fenders off. And then I got to find some way to get this body on that chassis by myself. So I'm going to finish unwrapping my early Christmas present. And we'll start working on the seals in the back, the engine seals. What a greasy, stinky mess underneath there. Terrible. It's awful. Full of worms. Lots of worms if you want to go fishing. Well, I didn't think that this would take as long as it would to take apart. I guess it took a while though to put up. So yeah, it's going to take a little while to put down, take down. I'm going to have about 10 days in a row where it's going to be beautiful, non-rainy weather. So I'll have time to dry that all out, and Danny can come over and buff it, and then I can probably put the chassis underneath it once it gets warm enough, or dry enough, excuse me. In a few days it'll be dry enough to wheel the chassis back here. There she is, folks. I like the color contrast. Pretty nice. Well, it'll look better when we get it done. Well, more work. Gotta take all this stuff apart and store it. And for you environmentalists, you would be proud of me, because this is the first time this is going to the curb in about 2 years. It's full of plastic and stuff. Alright. Well, it's been brewing for a day or so, and supposedly we're supposed to get some major hail. And yeah, I don't have a shelter anymore, so I'm going to have to do what I got to do. So fenders are coming off. I put my handles back on my pumps. I've got a plan to get this on the body today and get it in the garage. If you're in the wind, you better make sure and have yourself a bungee holding your doors shut, because if you don't have your checks in place, it'll rip the doors right off the car. Okay, since I have to put the engine in, I don't have my tar pads yet, or the chassis in. I don't have my tar pads yet, but I can jack the engine or the body up in the garage enough to get them in. But the thing I fear the most is putting these engine seals in, and doing that I don't think it'd be possible with the engine in the car, so I'm doing this now. This one is, I just don't know how you'd get that in there. I tried to slide it in there, but she just doesn't want to slide. And I might try this other side, so I've been kind of poking at it the best I can, poking it into there in order to get it. Now, examine your rubber and see that it has a little line and a little feature line. And remember, the engine is going to jack up into it, right? So if it was the other way around, it wouldn't seal as well. Okay, and the same with this. As this, the engine comes up into the bay, this little deal hooks around the edge of your engine tin, sealing it. Now, I can slide it, this one, in there, and I have been, a little at a time. Oh, it's going to make me a liar now. I can do it with two hands. And I can probably do over this side, but the rest of this I'm going to have to poke in there the best way I can. There is a little notch right here where they had kind of hammered it in to hold it in place. Make sure you bend that out of the way in order it'll slide in there. And I'll have to poke that in there, especially if you have a janky body like mine where these don't match up very well. We'll probably put a little sealant in there, a little dum-dum, to and here as well, to seal out every possible little bit of air that might come in from the bottom from the heat. Also, I'm going to want to give this underneath here a quick brush of Rust-Oleum like I did up underneath here. Then we can start jacking, and we'll put the body underneath it. One thing you have to understand is when you took the body or the chassis out of the body, it had no engine in it, and now it has an engine in it, and the fan shroud is 10 inches higher than before, and it just barely cleared the shift knob before, so we're going to have to really make this thing high in order to get the chassis underneath it. But I'll show you, because I worked out a plan, and a plan is good. Always have a plan, you know. Okay, that was real and it was fun, but it wasn't real fun. So you can see how your tin will fit in there, right? It comes up there, and a little shy here. Probably I can make a little bit of adjustment that way, just a little bit. So we'll do that. We got pretty good start on this, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to jack up this front end here. I was told that I wouldn't be able to do this by myself, so I took that as a personal challenge and do it myself. So I thought about this all night. Usually do that, sit there in bed and think about things like this, how I'm going to do it. And so I got a plan, and you know, I can jack that up, slip this one in there, you know, take the board, put it in, slip it in there, and then put that one inboard, scoot the whole thing out. Then I can raise the whole thing on the pump carts big enough to get, tall enough to get in the back there. I built another horse out of a couple of 15 by 36s and stapled them on this, and then yeah, there you go. So it's okay. And when I have this on here like this, to keep it from bashing your head into the hood, I mean keep the board from rolling, you put a couple of lag screws into that landscape timber. So I'm going to get this jacked up, and then I can get underneath it and paint that back end, and then I can get the body, chassis, and slip it underneath there. Yeah, I thought about this last night. The wife says I have a mind like a steel trap full of mice. Because this pump cart is out of the way and the car's jacked up, I crawled up underneath there and finished up the rear apron portion back there with a little black enamel. I just did it with a brush, just like I did this, just to finish it so I don't have to do it later. I've got just enough enamel left, Rust-Oleum, to do the front apron portion, so I'll do that as well. And oh, and I repositioned that gasket a little bit there, so it's even now, so around the back end of the engine gasket. All right, what I'm going for is getting this thing on here and getting it out of the weather. So I'm not putting a gasket on there. What? You're not putting a gasket? Don't get your panties in a bind, okay? We'll pick it back up and put a gasket under it, okay? A body gasket. I'm only interested in getting this thing in the garage. So it's not going to get beat to pieces outside, which I feel it's going to. All right, so we have to jack this up a little bit. We'll do one side and then the next. Slide the engine under, or the chassis under. I got just enough, and just enough is enough. Gonna take two hands. Well, it took a lot of work, and it took the help of someone else. So, yeah. So, my wife came out and gave me a hand. But there you go. So, there's a little gap here, of course, because they don't have pads. And there's no rubber holding everything, so I'm going to put a couple of bolts there. And, yeah. I'll be done. Oh, look at that. You see that ground bolt underneath there? That's all wrong right there. I got to get that out of there. Looks like somebody stood on that pan there too. Since I stood on that pan, what happened is it bent it down, I think, probably. Right there, got a gap there. But it'll bend back up, I'll tell you what. But if you look at my bolt, you know, I would probably come forward, and you know, I might be pretty close. I'll be. Okay. Well, let's get some bolts in this and get this in the garage. Okay, there she is, safe and sound. As a warning to you guys who take the floor pans off of these and put them back on, you know, the body's off, run yourself a tap up in there and make sure your holes are cleaned out, because even though I ran a tap up in mine and the holes were cleaned out, I used the original bolts. I don't suggest using the original pointed bolts because I broke two of them off up in there. Pretty nice, huh? All right. You would think the original German stuff is going to be better. I guess in this case it's not. Either that or the thread foul pixies come in after me and fouled up all the threads on my deal. It's highly possible that happens all the time. So yeah. Anyways, we're going to probably tomorrow we're going to park this in the center and put on the fenders and jack it up and put a seal underneath it and have this all ready and buttoned up for Dan when he comes by, and we'll bolt on the fenders as well, and we'll have it all ready for him to cut it and buff it. Okay, I'm feeling a whole bunch better about this because I've got this in the garage. I can put my fenders here, and I've got cars under the carport, which will be fine. You know, hail and all. So, okay, well, I'm going to get this one on the web, and it is possible to do this by yourself. However, the Lovely and Gracious came out and gave me a hand on this as well. So, okay, guys. I'll be jacking this up and putting seal underneath it next. Just to let you know, if you plan on doing this in your parents' backyard, this is what it will do to the grass. Wait a second. This is what it'll do to the grass. And now, since all I have is weeds and dandelions, hey, I'm aces. I'm good with that. She'll grow back. She'll be green again in a week. I said I should have been recording all this. This is Danny, and he's going to cut and buff this. He's brought all his equipment and more equipment over there. Yeah, and he's pointed out some areas here that are questionable. Actually, he asked me who painted this car, the Three Stooges. No. Anyways, so you know, we've got a lot of, you can see this, the orange peel, and this was the learning curve right here. So you know, you practice on. I guess you practice on the low parts, and then the parts that actually matter, that you want nice and smooth and reasonable, you do later, I guess, when you learn how to paint. Couple of things. I literally took a dauber in here because it was all fuzzy. I couldn't get paint in there, and I just painted it and then cleared it with a dauber so it's not so noticeable. I did sand a little bit this edge, and every edge where the paint came together, I took a dauber and put about 3 coats of clear on it. So, and the very tops of my doors were the same way. I know it's rough. You're not going to see that when you open it or when it's closed, you know. So there's going to be a lot of talent applied to this car, and it's like you can see the orange peel in the deck lid, opposed to where I glassed that out really nice, and it's all about learning. So we're kind of doing before and after, and I'll get some pictures of Danny doing his thing. But as I said before in my video, any old fool can pour paint on, but it takes a real professional to make the car look reasonable. So yeah, it really does. That's the end product of a body shop, is the guy who cuts and buffs. And what your car looks like afterwards, you know, he can take a bad body man or a bad painter and make the car passable, you know. But if you have a good body man and a good painter, he can make the car showroom. So there's a lot said about cutting and buffing. So much so that I won't do it because I don't cut and buff. I grind and burn. So, all right. Can you hear that? While Dan is in his Zen state, sanding away, and I want to say this: we discovered that. Well, he discovered, but I knew this to be a fact, that when you let clear harden for any more than a couple of days, it's not easy to sand. At his shop where he does his magic, the car's only set for a day and a half before he starts to sand. So if you let clear stand for more than a week or so, it gets harder than the hubbles of hell, and you can't, it's really difficult to sand it. So today's going to be a sand day, And later, maybe tomorrow, whenever, I'm not in a hurry, and he's not either, is going to be a buff day. So I'm going to close this video with some items I got from Hang Loose Dude Bugs, and I bought these parts simply because they were all available. Now all the parts were available at several places, Wolfsburg West and the others. However, they didn't have these. And Hang Loose Dude Bugs seemed to be the only place that had these, and you know what they are. They go from your heat boxes, the little heat boxes to the big heat boxes, if that makes sense to you. On the muffler, they go from the muffler to the heat boxes. There you go, I got it out. These are Denmark, so I'm hoping that's pretty good. Both of these rubber gaskets, I got a hood gasket and I got a deck lid gasket, or an engine compartment gasket, and both of these, I lost the tag to this one. It did say German made. So, and then I got these fender beading also, and these are German also. I found these to be quite peculiar because they seem to be some kind of amalgam of front or rear universal kind of a deals. I mean, they should work. We shouldn't have a problem with them, but I just found that weird. And then I bought the three-piece firewall. It does not say where it's made. That means it's made in China. This was pricey. This was $60 for this, which I thought was a lot. They had another one for $40. However, it had warnings on it that it was cheap and flimsy. So this seems to look really nice. And what we're going to do is, if there's time between him sanding and buffing, we'll jack the body up and put the seal on underneath the body. And while it's jacked up, we will put the firewall insulation in. So that way I can seat the body properly to the chassis. Okay, well, it's coming along, so give it time, and for all of those believers out there, I'll finish this up by saying Happy Easter to you all. Alright, thanks for wrenching with me, and thanks for participating in this build, and like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll try to answer your comments, and thank you for your participation. See you next time. Alright, bye guys. And now for some eye candy. This is at a dealership I've been doing work for nearly 30 years. You can see it. The guy who owned it originally had died, but the son had taken over. And originally, this place was an Oldsmobile dealership, so it's highly possible that he got the car from his own dealership. Isn't that beautiful? As a youth, I had its cousin, a 68 Buick Riviera, although it was not front-wheel drive. Mine was a Flintstone mobile that had more plastic in it than it had metal. But this is a beautiful car. I think it's been sprayed once. It smells like the interior of my Buick Riviera too. I imagine this being... I haven't raised the hood, so I don't know what it has under the hood. I think this is a 67, so maybe a 4 1/4 or 25. I don't know Oldsmobile engines, so I don't know. I really dig the glass on it. It's so green. The glass is so solar compared to the other cars and cars today. Interesting car, though. Beautiful. I'd like to raise the hood, but probably raise eyebrows raising the hood, so I won't. All right, see ya.